Hello and welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. This week we're continuing on in our discussion of the sign of the swarm of insects, the unspecified insects. And we're picking it up in chapter 8, verse 25 of Exodus. And I'll begin by reading from my translation of the Hebrew. But if you haven't watched last week's video, you'll want to do that first to lay the groundwork for this week. So Pharaoh called to Moses and Aaron and said, "Go, sacrifice to your God in the land." But Moses said, "It is not secure to do, since our sacrificing to Yahweh our God is an abomination to the Egyptians. Look, if we sacrifice the abomination of Egypt in their sight, won't they stone us? Let us go into the wilderness, a journey of 3 days, that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our God just as he says to us." But Pharaoh said, "I myself will send you away, that you may sacrifice to Yahweh your God in the wilderness. Only do not go very far away to pray on our behalf." So Moses said, "Look, I am leaving you. I will pray to Yahweh that the swarm will turn aside from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow. Only may Pharaoh not continue to deceive by not sending away the people to sacrifice to Yahweh." So Moses left Pharaoh and he prayed to Yahweh, and Yahweh did just as Moses said. The swarm turned away from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. Not one remained. But Pharaoh made his heart heavy, even this time, and he did not send the people away. Okay, so what we're witnessing in this narrative today is a negotiation between Pharaoh and Moses. So you could probably hear and sense that Pharaoh is hedging. He's not willing to fully comply with Yahweh's demands. So in last week's video, we looked at verse 20, where Moses demands that Pharaoh send away the people to serve Yahweh. That's the request from God, or the demand from God. Send us away that we may serve Yahweh. And here Pharaoh says, sacrifice to your God in the land. Don't go away to do it, just do it right here. And notice he's not willing to send them away. He's not also willing to have them serve Yahweh. He's too interested in having them serve himself. And so he says, you can do a couple sacrifices, but do them right here in Egypt. So we see that in verse 25. But Moses responds that this is just not a good idea, because the Egyptians would see this sacrifice as an abomination. In Egyptian religion, there were no burnt offerings. When people offered animals at the temple, they would become the food of the priests. So it's true that the way that the Israelites are planning to serve Yahweh would have been not quite what the Egyptians are used to. The Egyptians also consider sheep to be sacred. They worship a god who is like a sheep. And so it's possible that they would find this deeply offensive. Genesis 43:32 and chapter 46, verse 34, both talk about the role of the Hebrews as shepherds to be disgusting to the Egyptians. And so that also backs up this idea that it is particularly sheep or sheep and goats that the Egyptians find revolting. The idea of raising them either to eat them or to sacrifice them to God would have been objectionable. And so Moses says, we can't do what you're suggesting. We can't do this in the land. We need to go for a 3-day journey. So he specifies again a 3-day journey away from Egypt to do this work, to serve Yahweh. And so Pharaoh relents, but in a way that saves face. Pharaoh is trying to preserve his own honor. So he says, okay, go, but not very far. So he never explicitly says, go serve Yahweh. He never says, you may go a 3-day journey. He gives a version of permission that makes it seem like he's still in the driver's seat. He's still calling the shots. And again, is trying to preserve his own honor. And as we would expect, by the end of the scene, he changes his mind. We're told that not one remained after Moses prays for the relief from this sign of the swarm, for the swarm to leave, that not one remained. We'll be told that again in chapter 10, verse 19, after the locust plague, that not one remained. But we'll also see it more significantly in chapter 14, verse 28, when the waters of the Sea of Reeds come crashing over Pharaoh's army. We're told not one remained. Not one soldier survived the judgment of God in that final climax of God's signs and wonders. So Pharaoh was callous. He made his heart heavy or callous. He changed his mind. The idea is that he becomes guilty of injustice. Not only is he not doing what Yahweh demanded, but he's not even following through on his own word. He's not even making good on his own word. And this is yet another indication in a long string of indications that Pharaoh is guilty and ripe for God's judgment. And so when we get to the end and there's this dramatic loss of life in the climax, it's not without good reason. Pharaoh has been consistently denying, consistently refusing to comply with Yahweh's demands. So that is the sign of the swarm. Most of our English translations will call it a swarm of flies. That's just adding words in that are not there in the Hebrew. It just says the swarm, which maybe is a bit more ominous than telling them exactly what sort of swarm will come in. Some even argue that the swarm that came in was a swarm of wild beasts, wild animals, not just flying insects. That's a rabbinic tradition. I'm more convinced that it's a swarm of insects, but it's unspecified because the point is that it just invades the land and ruins it. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you're having a great week and a great trip through the book of Exodus with me. I will see you next week.